Julius Malema's new Economic Freedom Fighters, it's a political party we believe, calls for nationalisation, expropriation and centralisation in the name of economic freedom. However, according to Tom Palmer, who's Executive Vice President of International Programs at the Atlas Economic Research Foundation, if the EFF manifesto were to be realised, even in part, it could lead to a collapse into wretchedness. He joins us now. Good to have you in the studio. You're actually here on, as a guest of the Free Market Foundation.
I am indeed. I've been in Namibia, Kenya, Ethiopia, and I'll be going on to Zambia from here. So it's lots of African countries I'm visiting on this trip.
Those other countries that you visited don't have economic freedom parties, as we have now, it appears, in this country. They did stand for by-elections, and they were soundly beaten in all of those. So I guess there isn't exactly momentum yet, but there is a very populist manifesto.
Well, I read it and have investigated their program. The first thing I would say is this is not about promoting economic freedom. And in fact, their name is appropriate. They're fighting economic freedom. So the name Economic Freedom Fighters is perfectly appropriate. Crime fighters fight crime, firefighters fight fire, and economic freedom fighters apparently fight economic freedom. The program that they've laid out is really an assault, in my opinion, on the working people in South Africa and on the unemployed, because it means that they will have authentic wretchedness. Looking at the program, I think it's a reasonable prediction. If they were to get into power, this country would realize within 10 years actual famine. And by famine, I don't mean just a minor diminution in your well-being, but real hunger and starvation. We've seen before these kinds of massive land grabs by the state in other countries, and the consequence is starvation.
Tom, we've seen Zimbabwe, and I think that's a reflection for anybody just to the north of the South African borders. But are there any other examples where the kind of policies like nationalisation, centralised control, state management of resources have been applied and succeeded?
No, not a single one.
Not succeeded?
Not one.
But are there any examples of where they haven't succeeded?
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, the 20th century is littered with the corpses left behind by these kinds of policies. Look at the Soviet Union, collectivization of agriculture, seizure of private farms, the elimination of the kulaks. The kulak was a peasant who owned a little bit of land and a cow, and they were designated class enemies, bourgeoisie. China, the great leap forward, exactly this proposal for state-led industrialization and so on. 45 million people died in that country between 1957 and 1961. So we've seen this over and over. You go to the Korean Peninsula, North Korea, South Korea. South Korea has a private market economy, open to world trade. North Korea, state-managed, state-directed, no private property and land. 2 million people died of hunger in the 1990s in North Korea. So the evidence is simply available to us.
We understand that, but in Africa, or in a developing country, P is greater than E. Politics exceeds economics. And I guess once you get power, you can pretty much write the rules in certain countries. If you were sitting in my shoes as a concerned South African citizen, what would you be doing to perhaps identify these issues that you've raised so clearly?
Well, I think one thing is to communicate to the large percentage of young people in this country who are without jobs that this is waging war on them. Just take a very simple point. What is it that raises wages and creates jobs? It's capital investment that can come from domestic savings or foreigners. People too often focus on foreign investment as the only source of investment, but domestic capital accumulation is tremendously important as well. People do not invest for the future if they fear confiscation, period. No one plants corn hoping someone else is going to be able to come and harvest it. This is a simple fact. It's true every place on the planet. If you want to create jobs and raise wages, you need more capital investment, not less. This is exactly the kind of thing that scares off foreign investors and domestic investors as well, who are going to locate their capital abroad or consume it, rather than setting it aside in long-term investments.
Yeah, capital is cowardly, we know that, but populism does gather momentum, and populism in a country where education standards are not that great has a greater chance of success.
Not necessarily. There have been occasions in which public educational campaigns have explained the consequences of policies. Populism typically rests on wishful thinking. Elect me, and I'll do everything for you. It's really a kind of a belief in magic. But we should have turned the corner in believing in magic. There's cause and effect in the world. And the fact of the matter is that many of the people who are considered by this party as helpless victims are tremendous sources of energy and entrepreneurship and dynamism. Go talk to landless people on the land. What do they want consistently all over the world? Private property rights. They don't want to be part of some big communal system or the totalitarian allocation of land use rights, which is discretionary and revocable. And what that's going to mean is some people get it and some don't. Support the party, you get it. Don't support the party, you starve. What they want is private property rights. I was just in Namibia talking to people who are living now with the communal land system. They hate it. They realize there's too many cattle grazing on the ground. They're ruining the opportunities. There's going to be massive cattle die-off, and it's just going to get worse and worse until they move to private property rights.
So how do they change that? How do the people in Namibia that you engaged with who hate the system at the moment alter it?
They are trying to make their views known to the parliament, and the fact of the matter is, in South Africa, Namibia, and other countries, there are plenty of rational people in politics. You can talk to them about cause and effect, and you can say and show them the evidence, this will lead to catastrophe. Is it what you want? Some people are willing to risk that because they think they'll be the survivors and they'll be better off. Think about dictators around the world who've impoverished their people to enrich themselves. Ceausescu in Romania, and Mobutu Sese Seko in
Fortunately, people who were around before the internet, do you think it's changed much? Do you think the fact that anyone has access to information about history, about failed policies, will make a difference?
I do, and actually that's why I'm much more bullish on Africa's future overall. There's a young generation of people across the continent. They have cell phone telephony and smartphones. The cost of smartphones has collapsed. Young people can afford them. And they can see how the world works. They don't have to just get filtered information from their leaders. And these young people are demanding a change. There's a big movement across Africa of the Students for Liberty movement. That's in Kenya. I was at a big conference in Nigeria. Hundreds of young African people saying, we want free markets, we want opportunity, and we don't want to enrich cronies or further their grip on power by giving them all these economic assets through the state. So I'm generally quite bullish about Africa because it's the young people, that 16 to 25 demographic, that I think are going to change.
Tom Palmer, pleasure speaking with you.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you for sharing your wisdom. And Tom is the Executive Vice President of International Programs at the Atlas Economic Research Foundation. Tim Berners-Lee, the man who created the internet. I guess